A very pleasant good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever our viewers and our listeners are located, because we're getting feedback from all over the world. So we'd like to welcome you to your hour, and this is Rita Gadi, together with me, as I've said, one of the finest minds that we can find this side of the planet, my good friend from Cagayan de Oro, but now temporarily residing in his home in Quezon City, Bono ADAZA. Good afternoon.
Good day, Rita, and good day to all your listeners, and
Thank you.
especially to our fellow countrymen.
Yes, thank you very much. You know, Bono, we're increasing our viewership because everybody's interested to listen to what you're saying other than reading your posts in the newspaper. You have this Facebook post, and this is quite interesting. For all of those who are abroad and all of those throughout the country, we are very much aware that in May 2022, we shall be having national elections. But this is a different kind of an exercise for suffrage that we are going to experience. First, because we have this pandemic, which is hovering and now surging into great numbers of infections. In fact, I think yesterday, or was it? Yes, yesterday, we had something like 26,000. There are predictions it could even increase to about 30,000. Wherever it goes, that is the hovering virus, whether it is the Delta variant or COVID-19, whatever you call it, it is here. And that is expected to still be around next year at the time of the elections. So we don't understand as of now how the COMELEC will be handling voting, because there are certain health protocols like, well, you have to wear a mask, of course, and then there is social distancing. And you know how it is when you go for voting, mahahaba ang mga linya, and then inside the room, how many can be seated so that you have something like 1 meter apart from each other. But that is not the main problem. The main problem we are the common folk. And I don't know whether we have already graduated to a better folk, not just common, but that is where we're situated. It is not a matter of choosing leaders because there are so many of them. It's not a multiple choice. Like in one place, for instance, you have what? You have a congressman that you have to vote for. You have a governor. You have a mayor. You have the provincial board, the municipal and city officials. That's it. Ang dami niyan. Anyway, that's supposed to be part of the act of suffrage. Now let's get to the title of our program, which is The Measure of a Leader. Not just the choices, but how do we measure what we know as a leader? So Bono, we can start the ball rolling with that because you've talked about a lot of intellectual pygmies in your posts on Facebook, and that's the sad commentary we have of all of those who want to run for elected positions.
My concept, Rita, of a leader, since way back when, it's unfortunate that we don't get this type of leader in this country, except one. Now, there's only one president who can qualify in the parameters I've set for leadership. First, he must have character, integrity, and discipline. He must have the correct values, human values, and spiritual values. He must be brilliant. And may utak sa bayag, in the words of Speaker Laurel, utak sa bayag at bayag sa utak, brains in his balls and balls in his brains. He must be well-read. He must be visionary. He should have a concept of how we build a country here for our people, not for anybody else, for our people. And it should be defined very clearly in his blueprint when he presents his position to the people in the campaign. That's why I'm suggesting, Rita, that since we are in a pandemic, the campaign should be in media, meaning the debates the speeches should be delivered in a program like yours on a daily basis. On a daily basis. And maybe we should have as venue the different gymnasiums all over Metro Manila, observing the proper protocols. No? Proper protocols. So that we will know what kind of leaders do we have who are ambitioning to be president. You know, that's a major problem in this country because people elect leaders, especially on the local level, based on the 4Gs. What's that? Guns, goons, gold, and government. Now there is an additional element, Smartmatic, the machine, because even if the vote of the people can be disregarded by the machine. Now, I have been talking with some experts on Smartmatic that we need 80,000 PCOS machines for the depressing precincts. But you know what it takes to elect a president in this country with the use of machines? 220 PCOS machines can elect a president. Now that's a very sad revelation because the expert that I consulted speak with some element of authority, not only based on the Hello Garci tapes, but on some other sources.
Yes.
Even the United States of America and in Germany, they have abandoned machine voting. You know, the first bad example of machine voting in the United States of America was the state of Illinois, and especially the city of Chicago, whether it's Republican or Democratic mayor, but before it was always Democratic, Mayor Daley. And the machine in that area, I'm not saying that Daley was doing this, but my information from reliable authorities is when you, in 50% of the keys in Republican, every time you press it, 50% of that goes Democratic. So based on the machine, they have lost already from the very beginning. That's one of the sad parts, you know, of this machine use. Because Rita, even before Smartmatic, we were outplayed by the Cory computers. You know, based on the reports from the provinces and cities to the COMELEC, the CAC reports, 10 members only of the Cory group won in the senatorial slate. 12 were Grand Alliance for Democracy and 2 were tossed up. But the result, because of the Cory computers, 22 computerized senators were elected, all of them in the Cory ticket, and only 2 in Grand Alliance. That's in really an era. Maybe they were afraid that if in really an era will be out of the picture, something will happen. Another EDSA will take place and they'll be thrown out of their positions. So here, I think it's about time that people awaken. You know, one of the bane of the electoral process is the traditional politicians making motherhood statements, promises that they never fulfill, and after
before we get into that, Bono, I'd like to go into the details of what you mentioned, the 3 Gs: guns, gold,
and guns,
and now it's the Smartmatic. Anyway,
yes.
Well, nowadays, you know, it is really going to be a different kind of method that they will have to pursue. The threat of guns, for instance, well, you can't find them anymore in the urban areas, and perhaps you can have that in the provinces or the remote areas. Ang hirap kasi, not like before, as you said, the way it was then, you really had private armies. Now you don't see that openly exhibited, you know. So
now, Rita,
yeah,
there are no more private armies. There is only the government forces, the military and the police. So the government has a monopoly of all these forces.
Yes,
Anyone.
yes, but going back in the recent exercises that we had, there is, you do not really have that as rampant. What I'm trying to say, Bono, it's now a different kind of environment that we have. But let's get back to Smartmatic. That is one issue that seems open-ended. We had hearings held in Congress, in the lower chamber, and then we had hearings in the Senate, and they exhibited how this machine was being manipulated. That came out publicly. And we do not understand why, despite the fact that this has revealed so many things that can be done with these computers, the Commission on Elections nonetheless renewed the contract with Smartmatic, despite all you've said about other countries that have already removed this counting machine. So that is one thing which has not been resolved, but the resolution has been in the hands of the COMELEC. So be that as it may, we still have that as a danger. But candidates, Bono, have been saying, alam na nila kung paano ginagawa yung pandaya. So that means they also know how to make the daya. Because if you know, that is how it goes. So we leave that now for the benefit of those who are listening to us. Meron pa yung issue na yan. Kaya hindi tayo nakakasigurado na yung boto mo ay mabibilang. O kaya yung boto mo na yung in-encircle mo, yun ang lalabas. Hindi natin alam kung anong gagawin ng Commission on Elections sa lahat ng kanilang pinakita na meron dinadaanan iba. Meron Bono, there is, they make a detour. There is a big building that they showed where the detour of this election returns pass before they get to the electoral tribunal, the final electoral tribunal. So be that as it may, we will leave that because we have no control over it. We can keep on trying about it, pero ando na yon. Now, it is the choice of the people that we write in the ballot, which is very important. And that is where you're leading on to. Traditional politicians, sometimes you call them tradpoles ng panahon na yun. But Bono, during the time of the traditional kind of election, we had also very good politicians that were running for public office. That's why sometimes it is not just saying na kasi traditional politician yan, kaya pangit na tao yan, So what is the measure that we have of a leader? You already mentioned a lot of qualities and a lot of part of the character that they should have. But what is this? What kind of standard should we have? And parang sinasabi nga, it's not getting mature as a voter, Bono. It's the people and the faces that are being presented to us. Ano ba yung ating measure na kung sila talaga is a good leader?
I think, as I mentioned earlier, anong klaseng tao ito? Ano bang karakter ito? Balimbing ba ito? Yung mga balimbing, walang karakter yon, walang integrity yon. I'm most positively certain. It means they have no ideals, no principles, and no values. Their values are defined as the 3 Gs also, the 3 drives. Drive for wealth, drive for power and influence, and drive for sex. That's the main problem, Rita. Examine the leaders of our country, past and present, whether they are not subscribed by those parameters. Yes, even the present ones. But at least, like in the Senate of the past, most of them are highly intellectuals, well-read. They know about what went on during the period of Greece and Rome. And the United States of America, they can recite, for instance, the American Declaration of Independence and the speeches of Cicero. And these people, we love listening to them because we learn, like Pilais, Tolentino, Padilla, Sabido, Mabanag, Osias, Marcos, Alam mo, we yearn for those days because when you listen to the debates in the Senate or in the lower house, they scintillate with brilliant ideas. And the audience listen and learn. Listen and learn. Yeah, an example of that also is in the Batasang Pambansa. I'm not lifting my chair, but I'm saying that with respect to all the members of the Batasan during my time.
This is the parliament, when we had the parliament.
The parliament. Nobody would stand there spitting nonsense, spouting nonsense, because he will be laughed out by the chamber and by the audience. The audience and the members of parliament listen to the ideas of the debaters. One time I had a major exchange with one of the members of the parliament, which was so bright. And then at the end of the day, he was telling me, before he used to run after his opponents, when we were debating, he went to my table, and Komong Sumolong was telling me, be careful, he's coming to my table. And when he reached my table, Bono, congratulations. So you are an expert on the subject, we better have coffee. It's that kind of civility, Rita, that is needed in our time. Here, we always have shouting match.
You mentioned something which is quite significant, which is to present the candidates in media. So that is part of the social networking where people can watch them and listen to what they have to say. You were mentioning something about our time when the speakers had not only their intellectual prowess, but they were eloquent in their delivery. That is why you waited, you waited for them to speak, and there was some substance in what they were saying. So that is the kind of measure that we are talking about. What do these people, running for public office, what do they read? You were mentioning something about the Greek classics, the Roman classics, and a number of other speeches of other great men.
I think if you mention these names, Rita, now, you might think that these are comic strips. You mentioned Pericles, you mentioned Alcibiades.
Yes, the golden age of Greece. Yes, of course. There is so much to learn from history, and even in contemporary times. For instance, running for the presidency, I was going over the profile of certain leaders, and they were classified as either being there because of circumstance, or being there because of history, or being there because of a vacancy, or being there because they were actually elected by the people. So you could see that there are circuitous ways of getting to the seat of power. If we go down the rank of the other elected positions, if you go for the mayorship, which is also an executive position, or the legislature, it is the same measure that we have to look into. And as you've said, if they are exposed to the public, it is not just a matter of being oratorical. We had two candidates who already presented themselves to the people, and they were full of these sound bites that were already prepared early on, and which they were probably reading from somewhere. But then there is very little that you could really grasp, which is authentic and which is unique and which is new, and most importantly, which has a direct relevance to my life. When listening to them, as you said, ano ba ang magagawa niya para sa akin? Ano bang magagawa ng tao na yan para sa mga ginagawang batas? These are questions of character. And then you mentioned a lot of traits, which is important. And when we go to character, napakahirap talaga hanapin, Bono, the totality, or what you call the holistic character that we need. But at least we can find, even in a common folk person who's running for public office, the most important, as you said, is that he has an idea, he has a vision, he has an objective. And that objective is not his. Kasi ngayon, the objective is personal interest. You know, you have
Correct.
all of these platitudes about poverty, etc., and all of that. But in the end, it is just, well, as they say, power is the ultimate aphrodisiac. That is the main attraction, actually, for running for public office, because power then will give you wealth, you know. So that is connected somehow. Pero yun ang malungkot. So we come here now to the measure of character, to the measure of a leader. You mentioned many qualifications there.
Character is difficult to find, but they are characters. They are characters. Many of them are characters.
Performing roles,
Yeah.
you know, strutting and fretting on the stage, full of sound and fury,
Dancing,
signifying nothing.
singing, joking. Good God. We should find leaders who know what to do. Who know what to do. For instance, you ask these presidential candidates, what are you going to do with the legal system? What are you going to revise the system of justice in the Philippines? How do you intend to do it? It takes time to arrive at justice in the Philippines. As a matter of fact, if you have a litigation, it starts from the lowest courts and it goes up to the Supreme Court. Why? Why should it go up there and stay there for 10 to 15 years? You know, cases should be decided within a period of 6 months from the time of filing. It can be done if the participants in the judicial process know their business. The problem is it's their business, but they don't know their business. They don't know their job, but they know their business.
They extend the litigation because that is where the lawyers are getting paid. And, you know, that's where they earn a living. And that is the sad part about it. But that is very critical. That's very crucial. And we still have to hear a candidate talk about first the justice system and then the rule of law. As you said, Bono, that is so important in our life. Look at our prisons, how congested they are. For petty robbery, for several minor offenses, ang tagal ng litigation. As you said, it can be done, it should be done. But we still have to hear a candidate talk about that. How can you deliver justice as swiftly as possible? How can you be able to revise the justice system in such a manner that people do not have to wait for years to have their cases litigated and finally resolved? As you said, Bono, that is so important. That is the bedrock. That is the human law which is being administered. You know, it's very sad, Bono. I don't know where the moral character of the law.
They have the immoral character.
Yeah.
Not moral
and
character.
that's separated. So in many ways, that question of morality, the ethical standard, again, we're back with the standard, the measure of a leader, the ethics, the ethical standard, not only of the person himself, but of the ideas that he has. And justice is one of those that will really have to undergo the changes on that particular level, the ethical standard.
As the classicist Rita will say, a public official must be like Caesar's wife,
beyond suspicion,
above suspicion and beyond reproach.
Yeah.
Here, the mayor look at most of these officials, you already entertain suspicion. And when they start speaking and doing things, they are very reproachable. They're not beyond reproach. So there are certain standards that we have to observe, as you mentioned. And the people, you know, the problem is our leaders do not educate the people during the election campaign.
Because they themselves are not educated enough.
Precisely. You know, when I was running for governor, I have to go to my own personal experience. So running for governor, opposition governor, during the martial law time of President Marcos. And they were telling me, why do you keep on saying what people should be learning, what people should be doing? You should crack jokes and sing. I said, I'm not interested to be a comedian. I'm not interested to be a singer. I'm interested to be governor of Misamis Oriental. And the governor of Misamis Oriental should be #1 teacher. And that's what I'm doing. I'm telling them what they should do. I'm telling them what I will do, so that these people will learn in the process of the election campaign, instead of singing, dancing, joking. God's sake, they should be in the movies.
I hate to use that phrase, the mentally retarded, you know.
Yes.
The mentally retarded politicians, in a way that they have no direction when it comes to exactly what they have in mind, other than just to win. I go back and forth with the Bushido Code, Bono. You know, with apologies to those who have listened to me over the years, I always go back to this Bushido Code, which is originally oral, but you know, eventually in time it was written down. Of course, this is Japanese, but that's exactly how the conduct of their politics and their leaders and the manner by which they manage their government has survived over the years, that sense of discipline. So I'd like to mention, what is this Bushido Code that I keep on mentioning? This is a moral standard, actually, for every person, not just anybody who wants to be a leader. And what are these standards that they have? What are the values that they respect and that they imbibe and that they internalize? First, it is courage. The courage to stand for specific principles that matter. Second, benevolence. There is a kind of, you know, a magnanimity that they have. Can you imagine a person who is magnanimous, a leader who is magnanimous? And then you have the, you know, magnanimity is showing affection for the other, real affection for the other, a concern for the other. Yan ang kailangan hanapin. That is the measure of a good person and a leader. And then veracity. Nagsasabi ba ng katotohanan yan? You see how difficult it is to distinguish with a person ang galing mambola kasi maganda mga salita, and the veracity of what he is saying with the things that he is doing. You have to compare his life, his or her life, with the words that he expresses, and that's the veracity. And then it follows the sincerity. Meron ba talagang pinanggagalingan na nais maging public servant? You know, sincerity. And then honor. Oh my goodness. Yung honor na yan, they place that in the title of their names, the honorable so-and-so. Bakit lalagyan ng titulo na hindi naman nababagay sa kanila? Honor is something that you have inside of the person. It is a personal dignity. It is a self-worth of that particular person. And then there is loyalty. Loyalty to the law, loyalty to principles, loyalty to the government, loyalty to God, loyalty to your country. And finally, dun nga sa Bushido Code, self-control. Yan ang disiplina. You see that these are not the standards for a warrior, kasi yan ang ginamit ng sinasabi nga the samurai. That's why they were considered as really one of the finest at the time. But this is the Bushido Code, which, by the way, even ordinary Japanese people follow. It is a moral standard. It is an ethical standard. Hindi lang ito for leadership. I am mentioning this because these are part of the qualities that you must find in the character of the person that we are going to elect into public office. Imagine to have authority over our lives, to have authority over the law that they are going to implement and execute. So these are some of those, not some, but these are actually the summary of that code of moral standard, that code of ethical standard. Nahiwalay na, Bono eh. We have separated even human law from the moral standards of the law. Divine law is just in the churches, but there is no longer that divinity, the sublime, the holy, you know, in the implementation of our law. And that's exactly what we need, you know, today.
You know, Rita, talking about the Bushido Code, in Japan, when there is a smell of scandal, from the highest to the lowest official, in Japan, they either do two things. Either resign, like Kakiu Tanaka, when there was a smell of scandal in the process of investigation, even if there is no conclusion yet, he resigned. The other alternative is commit harakiri, But in this country, nobody will commit harakiri. Nobody will resign for honor. The only person I know who committed harakiri, and not real harakiri, similar to harakiri, was my good friend, Chief of Staff of the Armed Forces of the Philippines, Angelo Angel Reyes.
Yes.
That guy had a sense of honor. Sense of honor. And I could not believe it when I was informed that
I know.
I thought he was murdered.
On the
But-
graveyard. Exactly.
You know the charge, for instance, of the pabaon thing. It's the charge of the pabaon. The pabaon has nothing to do with government funds. It has something to do with funds contributed by fellow officers for retiring chiefs of staff of the armed forces of the Philippines. But I don't know.
But how many people will sacrifice their lives with just
Yes.
the smell of corruption or of some anomalous
That's
act
right.
that they have performed? I mean, now we are infested with this in such a way that, can you imagine? We are so bothered now with this variant that is contaminating on a daily basis 26,000 people. But you have your people in Congress and in Senate investigating the purchase of the materials needed for masks, etc., and all of this. Of course, if there is an anomaly, that is the justice system you're talking about, Bono. Kung meron talagang ginawang pagkakamali, ikulong na kaagad. I mean, why don't you just jail them immediately? Have them, instead of citing for contempt, yung mga hindi makasagot, resource persons, you're coming out with a lot of figures, the discrepancies with the amount,
that's
etc., and all.
Traditional standards.
Yeah, but
The traditional standards do not work to build a better country. It does not. As a matter of fact, I have a prescription for really rebuilding this country. I have a prescription. It's coming in a book, which I was hoping it could be printed in September, but I think it will go beyond that period. But at least before the end of the year, a configuration of what a leader should be doing in this country, rebuilding this country, because this has to be rebuilt. And it reminds me, Rita, a major speech that was delivered by the intercollegiate winner, oratorical winner, came from the UP College of Law. And it sounds like this. Have you ever tried to build a house of cards? Try it. And with the first gust of wind, it will crumble and fall. Have you ever tried to build a house on a foundation of sand? Try it. And with the elements come and blow and beat upon that house, it will crumble and fall because it's founded on sand. But build a house on a foundation of rock, and do the elements come and blow upon that house, it will stand because it's founded on rock. We should build a country here that's founded on rock, because this country has jumped from a house of cards to a house founded on sand. 2022 should be a benchmark year. It should be a tipping point for all of us to choose the right leaders, and specifically the leader who will sit there in that palace by the Pasig. That's important, very, very important, because the alternative to choosing a correct leader through the proper process, Rita, is too terrible to contemplate. Very terrible to contemplate, because in all these developments, there is a tipping point. There is always a tipping point. And when we reach the tipping point, we do not know where we go. That's why people should start thinking. I am glad that we are contributing to making people think on the kind of leaders we should be electing in this country in 2022. You and I should be retiring if we are to talk of chronological age. But chronological age has nothing to do with what we do and with what we believe.
Exactly. That is precisely why at this particular stage we are discussing this. You were mentioning something about next election in May as being a benchmark. That is a benchmark because the world has completely changed, really completely changed. There is now this period wherein we have the time to be by ourselves and really contemplate on our future if we should. It is not just a matter of food on our plate, but food in our hearts, in our souls, in our minds. How are we feeding our minds? How are we feeding our hearts? How are we feeding our souls? So that the decisions that we make will be able to be part of the greater decision of our country when it comes to an election, which is so important. That's why it's a benchmark. Now we speak of all of these people running for public office. And as you've said, some of them are very good dancers and singers and jokesters. And you have name recalls, for instance. Oh my goodness. Name recalls meaning that from the beginning of our political history, their great-grandparents were already there. I can only mark, for instance, my knowledge of contemporary history all the way back to 1965, because that was the first presidential elections I covered, which was then at the time you had Marcos and Macapagal vying for the presidency. And that was where covering the entire country. So at the time we had something like 81 provinces, and we did not have the division of regions yet, but we already had something like 1,634 towns and cities. So you can imagine that the campaign trail was really going to all the places which had a bigger population para hindi maaksaya yung biyahe. I wrote down the names of the politicians in those particular places, in those particular provinces where the rallies are being held. Remember at the time, just for those who were not born in 1965, well, at the time, and I was not just born, I was already covering that election, the candidates would go to the places which had the bigger voting population para hindi masayang yung gastos. And of course, they had to cover the entire country. Wala pang limit nun as far as the time period of campaign was concerned. So I wrote down the names of the political leaders in the provinces that the political wannabes are contacting para you talk to the big ones so that you can get their support for the votes. And would you believe, Bono, that these names that I listed down in the map that I have are still the same names that you will find today. I mean, surprising as it may be, next time I will bring that map so I can show it and my scribbling of all those names. So when you speak of name recall, that's it. That's what you have. And then, but let's get back to that idea that you have of presenting through social networking and through television these candidates. There was only one time, Bono, that political parties did not matter. That was during the time of Jaime Ferrer for the elections for the Constitutional Convention. COMELEC came out with guidelines. Hindi ka pwede mag-campaign na dala mo yung partido mo. Hindi ka pwede mag-campaign na mag-isa ka lang. Kailangan at the most, 4 kayo of whatever color you have. But that meant that everybody was open to presenting to the people his or her ideas as far as what he was running for. So you mentioned something about television. If you have 4 or 5 candidates altogether, then that would be a very good arena for the marketplace of ideas, so to speak. But do they have, again, we go back to the measure of a leader. Where do their ideas come from? Where should it come from? From the books they read, from their experience, from their family name, from their connections, from the oligarchs that are supporting them, or for their connections with the higher ups in government presently. How did a number of senators win in the Senate? Kasi malapit sa presidente, and all of that. So that is, again, the kind of measure we have to look at.
That's why this is really the test. To me, this is the final test for the people of this country. Whether we retain the current system with the kind of leaders we elect in 2022, or whether we should opt for real change. For instance, what are the real changes that I envision? Parliamentary and federal system.
Yes.
It's good to have a parliamentary and federal system because,
Yes.
as in my conversation with the late Vice President Laurel, I was telling him, you know, Doy, we should really be for a parliamentary system, because in a parliamentary system, no fool can be elected prime minister. In a presidential system, many fools are elected as president. No, correction, not fools, dumb fools. Hey, he agreed with me. In a parliamentary system, that's why I'm opting for a clean and lean government. We should have a parliament that is not composed of 320 people, most of whom are know nothing. We should have a parliament unicameral system where there are only 39 members of parliament. After all, we're just an archipelago. We're not a big country as China or Russia or the United States of America or Canada. Though we have more islands than many of these big countries, but they're bigger in many ways. We should only have a unicameral parliament with 39 members, 3 from each region. During the time President Marcos, in the experiment with parliamentary system, we had 13 regions. These are the best types of regions because these were studied very thoroughly. The later regions were gerrymandering to satisfy certain politicians.
Yes, they were creating, they were dividing provinces.
Yeah, exactly, that's my
so
point.
that they can accommodate, relatives and wives and mistresses and nieces and nephews.
Retain the 13 regions. Okay, 13 regions. So federal system with 13 regions or states. We have governors in the United States, where one governor only, because I'm for the abolition of provinces. Join 5 or 6 towns into one city. So that it could be easily manageable. And you don't deal with so many crooks.
The abolition of the governors is a very good idea because can you imagine a provincial governor cannot issue a business permit.
That's right.
You as governor, you can't issue a business permit. You can't do anything about fire prevention, etc.
Only one governor.
Yeah, it's a position in the bureaucracy actually that adds up to the expenses of government. It doesn't really matter because you already have the chief executives of every town and city, and that is more intimate with the people.
That's
the
right.
province, I mean, the governor cannot rule over 20 towns under him kasi, may mga mayors naman yan who handle already their own municipalities.
It's really duplication of function.
Exactly.
We should eliminate that.
Yes. All of this would need, Bono, new constitution.
Yeah, revision of the constitution.
And to have a parliament that will be enacted, you need, we go back to the foundation, which is the fundamental law, which has to be completely a new fundamental law. It is not just an amendment or revision.
Revision. I'm for revision of the constitution.
Yeah. Yes.
Reduce it to a few pages.
Exactly.
Under fundamental standards of a constitution. Reduce it to a few pages. As a matter of fact, like Article 3 of the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, so many things there. Reduce it maybe to 5 provisions only.
Because it covers already everything. Life, liberty, property, and all of this is already covered.
Yeah, it's a repetition, Rita.
Exactly.
That's it. Due process, substantive due process, which is covered by Section 1 of Article 3. So rewrite the Constitution in correct English.
I was about to mention that. Get a grammarian. Get somebody who's get a grammarian. Get a grammarian to correct long sentences and make it simple. And they try
to correct the 1935 Constitution in equal protection of the law. That's the correct English. Equal protection of the law, not equal protection of the laws. because equal protection with the law is a generic term
Yes,
to
exactly.
designate who lose. I don't, God's sake, that's one of my regrets. Offer.
It is always good to go back to the fundamentals. As you said, the foundation of a country should be built on rock. And the foundation is the individual, actually, if you look at it. How is it going to affect the individual Filipino? That is, this is not the abstract mass of people, the crowd, etc., and all of this. How will it affect the housewife, the driver, etc.? Look at the individual Filipino. That is how you relate the fundamental law. That is the foundation that will have to be set up. Anyway, Bono, your ideas are, speaking of those who would want to vie for the highest position of the land, which is the presidency, ay nako, I am recommending them to read the brief histories of the following people, because this is where you can have an idea of our contemporary politics and how these leaders were able to manage their respective countries. For instance, you have Gamal Abdel Nasser of Egypt. Study this because of the institutions prevailing at that time. They have to read how Gamal Abdel Nasser was able to manage the way Egypt was being run at the time. Then you have Habib Bourguiba of Tunisia. Now you have what is the Arab Spring, etc. And Tunis already has a different connotation, but Tunisia is a beautiful place, and it was overwhelmingly progressive at the time. And at the time of Habib Bourguiba, I think that is what our leaders, or those aspiring for leadership, should read. And then we have Norodom Sihanouk. Oh my goodness, this charming prince of Cambodia. And see how he has been able, well, of course, he stepped down from the throne to run his country. And so that is another example of the maneuverings and the movements of a leader. His charisma. How many people can you look at now, Bono, who has charisma? Ano, may mahahanap ka ba ngayon? What is this? Charisma is a gift of grace. Well, read about Norodom Sihanouk so you would know what it is to have this gift of grace, the relationship a leader has with the people, direct, actually. That is the political bond. And then, of course, well, we have to mention some African country, and this is Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana, another very complicated place, because precisely we can also relate to how we are tribal in a way, regionalistic in many ways. And as Bono was saying, the 13 examples of the regions we had then were really carefully studied. Perhaps our wannabes should go back to all of this. Parang, Bono, maybe we need a renaissance, a rebirth of the ideas that were then, not just to have a continuity, but to have this idea of coming out with the best and the brightest of thought, of ideas, of a vision. Oh my goodness. Baka pag sabihin mo yung vision sa mga kandidato, ang iniisip nila is to go to an ophthalmologist or to an optometrist, That could be their interpretation of it.
Rita, vision sa kanila is television.
Oh my goodness, yeah. So I just mentioned the names of these people that I hope whoever is listening and would want to run for the presidency, basahin nyo. So these are lessons that you could learn. Kasi andyan makikita the nuances of getting into power. Are you destined to be there? Or is it because of circumstance that you're there? Or did you create the circumstance to be there? Ang dami niyan. All of this political maneuverings and psychological, as it may be, and anthropological in many ways. But it all boils down to, as what Bono was saying, character. Standard.
Rita, I'll mention other names also,
Yes.
which would be my contribution to
Yes.
this conversation. United States, Woodrow Wilson, 1916. Earlier, Thomas Jefferson, who wrote the Declaration of Independence. Later, New Deal, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Very much later, New Frontiers, John Fitzgerald Kennedy.
Yeah.
Britain, Winston Churchill. Winston Churchill. Israel, David Ben-Gurion. India, Jawaharlal Nehru. Cuba, Fidel Castro. China, Chu Enlai.
And Deng Xiaoping.
Yeah, and Deng Xiaoping. And the Soviet Union before Russia, Leon Trotsky and Vladimir Ilyich Lenin. How they built a country, yes, Lenin. And Julius Nyerere of Tanzania.
Yes.
Yeah, Julius Nyerere, Tanzania.
Oh, these are names and people that I think whoever would want to aspire for the highest position of the land, they should go over the lives and the administration of these outstanding men to learn, to be educated enough, you know, as far as leadership is concerned. There are so many other qualities and measures that we can discuss, and perhaps as time goes forward and Bono and I will be still seated here, we will be going over a number of other ideas that we can present so that all of you who are listening to us will be able to internalize the importance of the act of suffrage.
And Rita,
yes,
they should be familiar with the legislators of the world.
Oh,
in
yes.
the words of William Blake, no?
Oh,
the
my
poets, they are the legislators of the world. And
the unacknowledged
you should
legislators of the world are the
these things
poets.
into the system. Integration of these many beautiful poems into their system. Yeah. Not
Precisely.
gold, but only man can make a people great and strong. Men who for truth and honor sake stand fast and suffer long, brave men who work while others live, who dare while others fly. They build a nation's pillar deep and lift them to the sky. A nation's strength. Ralph Waldo Emerson.
Exactly. Oh, Bono, maybe for the social debate that we will propose, we could just snap at a candidate and say, can you recite a stanza of your favorite poem, which could have some relevance to the
I don't
position?
think any one of them can. I'm sorry for them.
Maybe,
you subject them to that
maybe
kind of
somebody
place.
would recite something like Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, how I wonder where you are, or something of the sort. But be that as it may, it is the quality of a person who aspires for a position of leadership that is so important. And that is why Bono and I, we have seen the best and the worst of our history from way, way back, you know. So we come with our credentials as far as memory is concerned. We remember the names, the places, and the actions that these people have undertaken. We remember also those few who have a vision for our country. And that is why we bring it back so that you can understand the meaning of what it is to be a leader. So Bono, before we close.
Before we close, I pray, this is my prayer, that people studying and words of wisdom from books, from poems, from articles, from columns, be integrated into their system, because every day of your life, when you make a decision, you have to refer to a particular principle, to a particular ideal, to a particular belief. Without these principles, without ideals, without beliefs, we are nothing.
Exactly.
We are nothing. We're just existing. We're not living.
Precisely. Very well said, Bono. And there is one Tagalog word that actually encompasses all of that. Hugot. Meron ka bang paghuhugutan? Is there a source that you can, a wellspring from which you can derive the knowledge and the kind of vision that you would have? Precisely. Bono, before we close, let's look at those who have joined us. And just by way of acknowledging some of them. So we have, for instance, Ave Kylie Ru. Hello, Ma'am Rita and Sir Bono ADAZA. And watching from Okinawa, Japan. And more power for your program. Gozaimasu. Belinda Karina Boko, thank you very much. Oh my God. My goodness. Hello, Queen Mother Rita. They call me Queen Mother, Bono, because we organized, a friend of mine from the College of Law in Sambeda. We organized the first sorority of the College of Law in Sambeda. So they call me the Queen Mother, and that's precisely why it is important that we acknowledge this, why they call me Queen Mother. Anyway, Sylvia, I, and Diane, hello po ma'am, from New York, and we choose the decent at may malasakit sa bayan na leader. Yes, New York just celebrated its memorial of 20 years, the Twin Tower incident. Mark ADAZA, good afternoon. Thank you, Mark. Mark is the one arranging Bono so that he comes out.
Good afternoon.
Yeah,
Good
Mark.
afternoon to you. God bless.
Susan Rosales, good afternoon, Katipuneros. I'm late, but anyway, you can listen all over again. Good to see you, Assemblyman Bono ADAZA. Good to see you, healthy. Robert Tan was one of those. Robert Bantug Tan, one of those who earlier joined us. I will be presenting some of his products eventually because this is related to COVID-19. John Cyril Onato, good afternoon, Ma'am Rita, and your guest interview. Mr. ADAZA, Sir ADAZA, and people who are watching in KDPS, tama kayo dyan. We must choose and vote wisely. God bless you all from Capiz. Yes, I have relatives there. The sister of my mom is a resident of Rojas City. Siguiente o my Mirna, good afternoon po. I'm so happy to hear you and we're happy to have you with us. Isabelita Viñas, good evening po sa lahat. Lourdes Kalk, hello Ma'am Rita and Mr. Homobono, watching po from Accra City. Oh my goodness, in West Africa. Yes, that is exactly what I was talking about. In Accra, Habib Bourguiba was one of those that yes, Accra. It's a beautiful place. Freddy Oradina, talinuhan man ang pagboto, pinili na ng oligarko ang pagpipilian. Wait for oligarch-funded survey after October 8 and November 15 to be submitted to their influence. Smartmatic, oh my goodness. I love the way we can pun our words, you know. We can conjugate the English word. Actually, Bono, that is outstanding, you know. Ita-table mo. Diba? That's the English word which is being conjugated in Tagalog. China as template for economic political system. No poor, no homeless, all productive. Yeah, but you know how it is. The measures they undertook to have this discipline that they have. But that is something we have to study, Bono. The economic system of a communist country which is so capitalist. A communist country which is so capitalist and progressing the way the People's Republic of China is. That's a good study for economics. Rich business in China, etc., tempered and no monopoly, just like what happened to Jack Ma. Ayan, they're actually slicing down all of these monopolies now. Robert Bantug Tan, we need leaders who know what it truly means to be a public servant, what public service is really all about, and none of these broken promises. Yes, the measure of a leader is how he leads by inspiring a nation, walking the talk, leads by action. Oh my goodness, Robert, ang haba nito. Thank you very much, Robert. I'll read this again next time. John Cyril Onato, para sa akin, ang iboboto kong kandidato yung matino, mag-isip at hindi oligarko. Okay. Oh my goodness, maghanap ng matino ang isip, Bono. It's 6 o'clock. We have to close, and I'd like to thank all of those who've sent their messages. I will again go over this the next time we get together next week. And the next week is going to be a surprise guest that I'm going to have, but it will really entertain you as best as we can do this. So, Bono, thank you very much for having joined me.
Well, thank you very much too, and God bless, and keep safe, and be as healthy as always.
Yes, okay. So, I'd like to thank all of those who joined us and all of those who will be listening in. You can see us on Facebook and YouTube. Maraming salamat dam kila Ver and Roxanne who are also managing all the technical problems that we're having. This has been your hour, and this is Rita Gadi.